On today's show, why have the Memphis Grizzlies gotten off to a rough 0-3 start this NBA season? Plus, Ja Morant still out of the lineup for the Grizzlies, so Desmond Bane has shouldered the offensive load, basically becoming the number one option. So who can the Grizzlies turn to for more offensive output? Who needs to step up to the plate to help Desmond Bane shoulder some of this offensive load? It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and then you watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is so simple to play. You just make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. It's that easy. They have quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. It's what makes Prize Picks the number one DFS sports app on the market. Prize Picks even offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday each Tuesday, where Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. You've got to check it out. If you've been trying to figure out a way to get into DFS, go check out Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA or code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Grizzlies, Damichael Cole. You can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Grizzlies. And Damichael, a bit of a less than ideal start for the Memphis Grizzlies this season, sitting at 0-3 currently. But it's not like any of these losses have been disastrously bad. A 7-point loss opening night to the Pelicans, then a 4-point loss very close to the Denver Nuggets, and then another 7-point loss to the Wizards. So walk us through, DeMichael, what's going on right now with this Grizzlies team where they're competitive, they're in these games, but they're not quite able to close them out. What's going on?
Yeah. See, when you talk about it like that, they're competitive and they're in these games, but they're not able to close them out. It speaks to what they're missing right now. They're missing their closer in Ja Morant. That's the obvious one, right? But beyond that, the depth is shattered at this point. Think about it. Just a week ago, the Grizzlies were expecting to have Steven Adams in the starting lineup. Santi, Aldama, and Luke Kennard are both expected. I think it's very clear to say those two should lead the bench, the second unit in scoring, Santi Aldama and Luke Kennard. They don't have any of those guys right now. So you don't have Steven Adams, who's arguably, one of the best rebounders, one of the best screen setters in the NBA, does a lot for the Grizzlies, a lot of the dirty work. We already know about the Ja absence, but they prepared for that. But it's the bench depth. Santi Aldama and Luke Kennard may not scream, as, these, great guy, great NBA players. But Luke Kennard is one of the best shooters in the NBA. He's led the league in three-point shooting percentage each of the last 2 seasons. Santi Aldama had a breakout year last year. He's building on it. His floor spacing as a 4, he moves down to the 5 and stretches. What he does for this Grizzlies team is huge. Those guys' absence has kind of put other players who I would say the Grizzlies aren't, they probably would prefer not to have in the rotation at this point. It's forced those guys to get more minutes. And the depth just isn't there right now. The Grizzlies just don't have the depth. They don't have the quality depth. They have depth, but they don't have the quality depth right now to kind of beat those top-tier teams. So they have to battle through that. The defense is going to have to carry them at some point, and once they get to that point, they'll be fine.
Now, for Kennard and Santi Aldama, kind of what's the latest on those two guys? How much longer are they supposed to be out and kind of missing this crucial early part of the season?
I don't think it'll be much longer on either one. When you took Luke Kennard, you remember in the very first game against the Pelicans, he left in the third quarter, had a really bloody nose, was put in the concussion protocol, so he's going through all the tests and things like that. And then, of course, like most NBA and NFL franchises, when you put someone in a concussion protocol, they're very cautious, they're very careful. And that's the case with Luke Kennard at this point. He looks fine. I'm sure he'll return probably within the next week. Same thing with Santi Aldama. Actually, when he hurt his ankle right before the season opener in a practice, they said that he would be quote unquote day to day. When most people say, okay, it's day to day, but he's missed the first 3 games. Well, you got to remember that the Grizzlies played 3 games in 4 days. They played the first game, skipped a day, then they had a back to back. So I think Santi's close and Luke's close, but we'll see, where they go from here. But I think by the end of this upcoming week, they'll have at least, those 2 guys back.
Yeah, the NBA really doesn't mess around with the concussion protocol stuff.
No.
The Houston Rockets did their home opener against the Warriors Sunday evening, and when they did their long, introduction for the entire roster lineup, they got to Jock Landale, who's currently in concussion protocol. Dude wasn't even out there to do his walkout, and I was like, man, I guess they got him wrapped in bubble wrap somewhere in the back of Toyota Center or whatever. They really do not mess around with the concussion protocol stuff. So you get into these games, and obviously the depth is all messed up because all these injuries, and you've got your 2 major contributors in Steven Adams out, and obviously Ja Morant still out. So a lot of this has fallen on Desmond Bane being kind of the heavy lifter offensively. How is he kind of slotted into that role, and how is he kind of responding to being the number 1 option so far early in the season?
I think Desmond Bane is coming along. I mean, he is truly turning into one of the better guards in the Western Conference, to the point where I think he has a chance to make an All-Star appearance this year. And I will say, I'll be the first one to say that there are probably 10 guys on that list when you talk about the point guard position in the Western Conference and the shooting guard position. There are probably 10 guys maybe ahead of him right now. But at the end of the day, he's going to end up averaging probably 24, 5, and 5 across the board. His versatility, he is more than just a 3-point shooter that he's probably known as nationally. He's putting the ball on the floor, getting to the basket. He scores in transition. He's playing, quality defense, and he's a playmaker for the Grizzlies. Basically, with Ja Morant out, he's one of their de facto point guards, along with Marcus Smart and Derrick Rose. He plays on the ball a lot with those guys. So he's having a big year. You look at the raw numbers. I think that Denver Nuggets game, he shot 4 of 17 from the field, but he started 1 of 11. And he finished really strong. So he is a leader in the locker room, and he's all the things you want kind of in one of your star players. A lot of people kind of looked at it funny when Desmond Bane got that big max deal. They're like, Desmond Bane, get a max deal. But I tell you what, if the Grizzlies' idea when they gave him that contract was they're paying for what they're going to get going forward, I think he can show that he deserves that type of value. He's a great number 2 option long term. I don't see him as a number 1 option, being that isolation scoring is one of his weaknesses, and the best 1 options in the league are the best isolation scores. That's not a strength of his game right now, but he can score, off the dribble and all that, but he's more effective in situations like we have Marcus Smart, handling the ball, and they'll run an off-ball screen or do a pin down or something for Desmond Bane. And he can kind of create for himself out of those situations. He's kind of a really good secondary playmaker. He's coming along, man. I think a lot of people need to be aware of what Desmond Bane is doing. I think this is the year he kind of makes himself, a name in the Western Conference.
Maybe more of that household kind of name that more people are a little bit familiar with now. And Desmond Bane might be having, fantastic start and really kind of embracing and doing the most with that number 1 option role. Obviously not his best role moving forward. Ja Morant is coming, he'll return further down the pipeline. But as it stands right now, where does this Grizzlies team go for more offense, Damichael? Because I think that's kind of the issue. You look at the numbers. I know it's a small 3-game sample size, but right now the Grizzlies, they're a bottom 5 offense in the NBA. And it feels like they've got Desmond Bane, and then there's just a gap between whoever else can provide them any little bit of scoring punch, through these first 3 games.
They're going to have to, they're going to have to get it out the mud, Jackson. At the end of the day, you say, who's their best offensive option outside of Desmond Bane? To be honest with you, it's the defense. The defense has to play to the level of, because guess what? Even with Ja Morant out, even with Steven Adams out, the defense is the one area that should still be holding the fort. They're going to lose something offensively with Ja Morant and Steven Adams. But guess what? Instead of starting Ja, now you got Zaire Williams, who's a 6'9" guy, long arms, takes a lot of – he's a very good point of attack defender. So now you have him in the lineup. You take Steven Adams out of the lineup, yes, you're going to lose some of the rebounding, but Xavier Tillman was a defensive player of the year in the Big Ten, and he's a very versatile defender when it comes to switching out onto guards and holding his own against bigs. So you subbed out, you missed the offense, but defensively, you should still be one of the elite defenses. So far, that game against the Wizards had their way for a large part of that game. The Nuggets are the Nuggets. I mean, you just got to chalk it up. And the Pelicans kind of toyed with the Grizzlies defense. They started slow last season as well before they ended up being a top 5 defense, and same thing with the year before. So these Taylor Jenkins defenses typically do get off to slower starts. I know a guy like Marcus Smart, he was telling me the other day how he likes to communicate, and right now it's harder for him because he doesn't even know what he's saying. He doesn't know the calls yet. Like it's like another language for him after coming from Boston for all of those years. So the defense has to come along. And once the defense comes along, guess what? You create those transition scoring opportunities. That's going to make the scoring easier. And that's what I mean by they got to get it out the mud. Because the Grizzlies don't have guys where you can just say, the offense isn't working right now. Just clear it out. Let's let these guys go one-on-one and let's get to the basket. They don't have those guys. They have to get out and transition, drive and kick. That's how this team is going to create their offense. And at the end of the day, the defense is going to have to start it.
Can the Memphis Grizzlies survive the early part of this season, weathering the storm of injuries and, missing, obviously, Ja Morant, one of the biggest pieces, the biggest piece of this Grizzlies team? Where can they find more offense? Is it going to come from their defense? You're going to have us covered for all of that and so much more over at Locked On Grizzlies. Damichael, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Anytime, man. Anytime.